interesting topic here. So let me introduce myself. My name is Sandra Colhando, and I have glossophobia. Now, before I can share what glossophobia is all about, let me ask you, how many of you are aware that you have phobias? Wonderful. Okay, let's take a quick quiz. How many of you have atelophobia? Got a fancy name. It's a fear of being imperfect or having a lot of imperfections. Yeah, you have that? Great. I didn't know I had such fancy terms for my phobia. Yeah, great. What about cherophobia? Have you heard somebody tell you, don't be so happy, something's bad is going to happen? That's a phobia. We've all been very familiar with this one. What about the next one, which is anthropophobia? I know I had this in school. The fear of being judged, especially when I used to go up and present or during my exams or my viva. Okay. How many of you have pretended to have a phobia? Yeah, I did that a lot until my parents found out I was pretending. And if I had known there was a fancy name to it, they would probably believed it. Diascalenophobia, I think. I'm still trying to figure this one out. It's the fear of going to school. Yeah. So why am I here talking about fears and phobias with all of you? What makes me qualified enough to talk about fear? It's because majority of my life, I allowed fear to rule me and restrict my growth. And I didn't find who I was. Until there came a time where I said, that's it. I've had enough. I need to find who I am behind all these fears. And the next two phobias are my personal conquest. It's acrophobia, fear of heights, and glossophobia, fear of public speaking. I had them for many, many years, taking care of them very deeply until I decided to break free and do things that I would never, never have dreamt of to overcome these two phobias. And the next couple of minutes, I'd like to share with you how I attempted to overcome these two phobias. One of them you're experiencing here and now, standing up in front of you. And it's quite interesting when we talk about phobias. For me, it all started with, let me understand what fear is all about. Because as I met people and I started working with a lot of people, I'm a life coach, I realized everyone has fears. And slowly I started realizing it's inevitable. You just cannot escape it. So I thought, let's figure this demon out. Let's understand where it's coming from. And the more I studied and researched and did a lot of personal experiments, I actually realized it's a great thing to have. Number one, it's a natural biological process. You cannot not have fear. You'll always have fear. It is ingrained in us. If we did not have fear, our species would never have survived millions of years. So fear has actually helped us come a long, long way. It is there to protect us so that we continue to survive in this world. And let's understand a little bit more about what fear. So the Oxford Dictionary calls fear as a very strong emotion that is caused by an anticipation, awareness of danger, and it is there to immediately protect you from harm. But how does it work in our entire process? We have this clever thing called the brain. So the brain is the one that conjures up a lot of fears. Some of them are really valid, and some of them are made up. So let's talk about the valid ones and get them aside, and we know what that is all about. So how it works is when you come across a stressful stimuli, which could be a snake, it could be a gun on your head, or in my case, it could be an audience waiting for me to speak. The body starts reacting and developing chemicals to take care of this fear, which would be in the form of your muscles tightening, your heartbeat going faster, your palms sweaty, your breath going really shallow, because your body is getting ready to fight or flight. This is what typically you would have done, or your Homo sapien ancestors would have done, is when you see danger, your body gets ready to run away or fight it. And that's how the brain is developed. So if you see this, I've got a picture of the brain here, great. So if you see, when our sensory organs take in information, that is your eyes, skin, touch, takes in information, it sends this information data to a brain part called thalamus. That's the center that collects this information and decides where to send this information to. So the thalamus sends two signals. The first, the shortest route, goes to the amygdala, which is the brain's threat center. It decides it is a threat and I need to protect this being from being threatened. And so what happens is, it starts getting your body aware, and sometimes we are not even aware that we are under threat. And we are responding to fear. It's like there's this loud sound at the front door, and before you can think who's at the front door, you're already prepared. Your body is trembling, or you just shocked what's happening and you're ready to just run to see what's happening. That's the automatic syndrome that works. And then it goes to your prefrontal cortex, the second signal, which is the new brain, which is the analytical thinking brain, that actually figures out whether the sound is a real threat, a threat to survival, and then I need to fight or flight, or it is actually not a threat to survival. It's a fear that's just come on you. So what happens is, once you realize that this fear is a threat, is not a threat to survival, is a trick to overcoming this fear. Because fear can be imagined, and that imagination can be taken as real in your brain. So for us, it gets very important to understand what fear is all about. And for me, it took a process of really understanding which aspect is this taken care of. Once the fear of danger is taken care of, then I need to figure out where this is coming from. And during my research, I realized there are two sources where these fears come from. The first source lives in the past. It comes from past experiences. It comes from experiences where you've burnt your hands, you've gone through a trauma, you've had an accident, you've gone through an experience that has led to a belief of fear. And that takes a little longer process to get over that fear. What scientists believe is fear releases stress hormones that strengthen memories in you. And these memories are called flashbulb memories. And so whenever you need to recall a painful incident, it's really fast because it kind of strengthens it. If I ask you what you had for lunch day before yesterday, would you remember? No. But if I ask you to share a painful experience or a memory, you'll be surprised to find out the minutest details you remember that could have happened years ago. That's how it works in terms of strengthening this memory. So the first step to overcoming this fear is releasing that memory from the emotion. And this process is known as conditioning. There are fear conditioning that's happening, that's extinction conditioning. So let me just explain that in very easy terms. And this is one classic example happened. I don't know whether you've read about, there's a classic example of fear conditioning that was run by Dr. Watson with a child called Little Albert. What had happened was, the child was not afraid of white rats. But whenever that white rat was paired with a loud, scary sound repeatedly, the child started developing a fear of white rat. So every time a white rat appeared, he would just get fearful. And that fear extended to all white fuzzy objects. That is how you develop fear conditioning. And to break that, which you all are looking towards, is you do just the opposite. You pair a stressful incident with something that's more calming and neutral. For example, how many of you have been attacked or bitten by a dog? Oh, okay, quite a few. Great. So, and I've had this experience. A lot of my daughter's children would come home and they've been attacked. They were really scared with the pet at home. So when somebody's been attacked by a dog, they develop a negative experience around dogs. They may develop a lasting fear of dogs. And that can be removed from a long process by conditioning and exposing them to very gentle, loving dogs. Just the opposite of what they've been attacked. And the more time they spend with gentle, loving dogs, they're able to disassociate that negative experience with the dog. And that's how you start removing or extincting the fear conditioning in somebody. Now, I'd like to move to some of my fears which I experience a lot, which is anticipatory fear. Anticipatory fear is basically, there's no fear. You've never experienced it, but you love creating it in your mind. So any new or challenging situations you take works in this cycle of creating anxiety within you, and that anxiety leads to panic, and panic creates a lot of negative thoughts about the situation. If you remember, if you get into any new situation, you realize that you just get so many negative about that situation that everything that could go wrong, it kind of paralyzes you. It stops you from taking that jump that you want to do. And that's where the whole work happens, in stopping this belief process, in taking that stand. And for me personally, both my phobias were related to anticipatory fear. I started with first working on myself and understanding what is the data I have to work on the belief that I have that this is a real fear. Do I have a past experience that I've tumbled or made a fool of myself public speaking? No. Do I have any data that will prove that I'm not going to be good in public speaking? No. So what stops me from starting off small? So in my glossophobia, I started taking a very small step, which was in my comfort zone. Starting with speaking with people I like, starting with speaking to my team colleagues, my friends, and then expanding that little to my colleagues, to then senior levels in my organizations, to neighbors, and then finally opening a company that only does corporate training, doing that day in, day out helps, and then eventually come to a public forum and speak. So it was a baby step that took one ladder at a time to reach the aspiration of overcoming this public fear. The other fear is a little more complicated, which is my fear of heights. And that is something I said, I'm going to take a surgical step towards it. I'm going to do something that at one go I'm able to overcome it. And I said, what is the highest place I can go and take care of this fear? And the highest place I could think of was jumping off a plane. So my first step was, let me first prepare myself, read a lot about it, research what is the safest place for me to do a tandem sky jump. Zeroed that on. I've got the safest place on earth to jump from. I've done a lot of research, so read a lot of motivating stuff of people who've gone through the jump and how that's pepped me. I got my support systems as well. I got my husband and my aunt to actually get into the plane with me so that over there if I panic, I have them around me. And then I sit on the plane all excited, ready to jump. I've got all of my bases covered and it's going to be a beautiful experience. Until in front of me, I see a guy sitting with a parachute with a big red message saying danger. And on that parachute, that was enough for me to trigger all my fear syndromes. I was so scared that I had made the worst decision in my life because that had triggered my amygdala, my automatic response. Suddenly I realized I was buckled up and it was all loose and I'm going to fall and die. Outside the sky, it just seemed like a death trap. It didn't seem like a beautiful sky anymore. And it all just happened a couple of seconds and I was slid in the end and my jumper said on the count of 3, we'll jump. And I said, I'm not going to open my eyes. This is the most dreadful experience ever. I'm not going to see it. So he says 1, 2, and he jumps at the count of 2. So there's no 3. And as soon as we jump, I thought I was going to die. Because what happens when your amygdala triggers? Your heart starts beating faster. You start getting nervous. Your body's all tightened. So I've forgotten the instructions he's told me with my hands. And I'm all nervous and breathing really fast. And what do you need at 13,000 feet? You need oxygen. And you get oxygen by breathing slowly and deeply. So at that time, my thought was, I don't think I'm going to even make it on the ground. I'm just going to die of lack of oxygen, because I was so panicky at that moment. Until a few seconds later, and this was about 45 seconds, the longest in my life, dropping at the speed of 200 kilometers an hour. So we dropped from 13,000 feet to 8,000 feet in 45 seconds, which was the longest for me. And then I hear a pull, and my instructor pulls the parachute string. And that string opens out to a beautiful red parachute horizon from the clouds above. It was so beautiful that I just forgotten about the last 45 seconds, the dreadful 45 seconds. I just couldn't believe what I was looking in front of me. And this whole experience taught me one thing. Whenever I look back, I said, I have a choice. I can carry that fear as a black parachute bag on the back, which is always going to be there, with a red danger sign. Or I could just pull the string and just watch what happens and release that fear and see where that fear takes me to the heights that I never imagined. And that's when I kind of associated this beautiful emotion of fear with freedom, with exercise, so that when anything that comes my way and I get into this anticipatory fear, I know I have the string with me and I can pull that string. Leads me to a happier, more fulfilled self. So what I'll leave with you today is 3 beautiful points. One is embrace fear. It's just one part of emotion. You are a lot more. Whenever you choose, you can pull the string. The second is accept who you are with all your flaws. And the last one is overcoming fear is your own growth, with your own personal growth and your professional growth and emotional growth. And that leads you to a lot of happiness and a lot of fulfillment. Thank you. It was a pleasure pulling my glossophobia string in front of you. Have a great day, everyone.